Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something pretty significant happening over at the U.S. Justice Department. It looks like a real shift in how they're tackling certain kinds of white-collar crime. And for you listening, especially those gearing up for the UPSC exams, this is, well, it's exactly the sort of current affairs topic touching on economics, international relations that could pop up, mains, maybe even prelims.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting, I think, particularly if you're trying to understand the nuts and bolts of international law and governance, is the timing. This whole thing seems to be rolling out after an executive order President Trump signed, about 2 months back?
Yeah.
That order basically told the Justice Department to pump the brakes on going after Americans accused of bribing officials overseas.
Exactly. And it's not just some small tweak, is it? As we get into this, you'll see it's potentially a whole rethinking of how the U.S. looks at business conduct internationally. So our goal here in this deep dive is to really understand these changes, what they are, why they're happening, and crucially, what the fallout might be, especially for businesses and people working across borders. And this info, which is, core daily UPSC mains material, it's coming from a detailed report in the Indian Express.
Right, so let's start with that executive order itself. The Indian Express piece really flags its main point: a temporary stop on prosecutions under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA, from '77. This halt is supposed to last until they figure out new enforcement rules, and the stated goal is all about, making American companies more competitive globally.
Okay, let's unpack that a little more for everyone listening.
Yeah.
The FCPA, it's been the main tool the U.S. uses to stop American firms bribing foreign officials for, decades, right? So this order basically just hits pause. And it's not just temporary, is it? The report says any new FCPA cases or actions now need the Attorney General's personal okay. That seems like a pretty big shift in who calls the shots, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely. It pulls the decision-making right to the very top of the Justice Department. And if you think about the bigger picture, from that international relations angle, relevant for UPSC studies, saying it's about American competitiveness, well, that hints at a possible change in how the U.S. weighs its own laws against its economic goals globally. The argument seems to be, as we'll probably get into, that the FCPA, as it was holding U.S. companies back.
Right. And this order isn't the only piece of the puzzle. The Indian Express report also mentions a directive from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. She's told prosecutors to shift their focus, the new priority. It seems heavily weighted towards anti-money laundering and cracking down on sanctions evasion, particularly targeting drug cartels and big international crime groups.
Yeah, and that's where this observation from the Wall Street Journal, which the Indian Express picked up on, is, it's quite telling. They basically say the administration is, quote, effectively redefining what constitutes a crime in some business conduct cases. It's not like they're suddenly making bribery legal, but by changing where they put their resources, some business stuff, like foreign bribery, it might just not get the same level of attention or prosecution. For UPSC aspirants, understanding that kind of priority shift in a major power, that's key to seeing how international legal norms might be changing.
Okay, so let's think about who might actually benefit from all this. The Indian Express report seems pretty upfront that one goal is relief for U.S. citizens and companies. But it also notes that other companies, maybe foreign ones, and executives already caught up in U.S. court cases could see things tilt in their favor. And this is where it gets really relevant for understanding global business and law. The Indian Express specifically brings up senior executives at the Adani Group. At the time of the report, they were apparently facing bribery allegations in the U.S.
And it's crucial to add, as the Indian Express does, that the Adani Group strongly denied all of it, called the allegations baseless. But thinking about UPSC prep, you see the connection, right? These high-profile cases, policy changes in a huge economy like the U.S. What does that mean for international business, for investment, the timing, this policy shift happening while these legal issues are ongoing? It definitely makes you wonder about potential upsides for those involved.
Indeed. And the ripple effects might go further than just Adani itself, right? The report also mentions Azure Power and their contract with an Adani firm for a solar project. It just shows how U.S. policy changes can kind of indirectly touch a whole network of international business deals and investments. Something important to keep in mind for grasping global economic flows.
Which leads to a good point about how these changes actually play out on the ground. The Indian Express gives a pretty striking example with Alina Habba. She's the new U.S. attorney in New Jersey. Her decision, apparently, to drop the charges against former Cognizant executives accused of paying bribes over in India. That really shows the immediate effect of this wider policy change.
Yeah, that case makes the abstract policy suddenly very concrete. Good stuff for potential UPSC case studies. According to an internal DOJ memo, the Wall Street Journal saw it again, reported by the Indian Express. Haba's decision actually overruled prosecutors who'd already gotten the green light to go to trial before she took the job. That suggests this new, maybe more lenient approach to certain white-collar stuff is being put into action pretty quickly and decisively.
It really highlights how powerful these top-level policy decisions can be in changing the course of active legal cases. So let's talk about the White House's reasoning for this whole shift. The main argument, according to the reports, is that the FCPA, when it was strongly enforced, put American companies at a disadvantage globally. The idea is companies from other countries might be doing things the U.S. calls bribery, just as standard practice for business elsewhere.
Right. The White House fact sheet, which the Indian Express mentioned, really hammers this point. It says American national security relies on getting strategic commercial advantages around the world. And the report says the Trump administration called the old FCPA enforcement excessive and unpredictable, said it stopped U.S. firms competing properly. So it's framed as a trade-off, basically. Maybe less tough on foreign bribery, but hopefully more success for U.S. businesses abroad. A tricky balance for any country, really.
And to really get why this shift feels significant, it helps to know what enforcement looked like before. The Indian Express report notes that just in 2024, the Justice Department and the SEC together launched 26 FCPA enforcement actions. And by the end of that year, something like 31 companies were known to be under investigation. So that data shows FCPA enforcement wasn't exactly dormant before this change. It was an active area.
That really puts the current change in perspective for you, doesn't it? We're not talking about some minor rule nobody noticed. This is a policy shift impacting quite a few ongoing and potential legal fights.
Yeah.
And as you'd probably guess, the legal and business worlds have definitely noticed.
Oh, absolutely. The Wall Street Journal piece via the Indian Express says some defense lawyers, seeing which way the wind was blowing, started pushing prosecutors pretty hard to drop cases or just halt investigations altogether. That kind of quick reaction from lawyers shows the policy change is having a real impact on legal tactics and what people expect might happen.
The Indian Express report even gives specific examples which really paint a picture. Lawyers for Polymarket, that's a crypto prediction market, they're apparently trying to get an investigation shut down. And Boeing, the aircraft giant, was reportedly trying to back out of a guilty plea deal linked to the 737 MX crashes, a deal that would have meant having a compliance monitor breathing down their neck.
Yeah, and the Glencore case is interesting too. They're a huge commodity trading firm. They'd already pleaded guilty to overseas bribery charges, but this year, the report says, they got support from the Justice Department to end the work of their court-ordered compliance monitors early. It suggests maybe a broader trend of easing up on some of the tougher penalties and oversight that used to come with these kinds of cases. For your UPSC understanding of corporate governance and regulation, that's definitely a trend to watch.
And finally, the Indian Express report mentions some recent pardons too, right? President Trump pardoning people convicted of white-collar crimes, like Trevor Milton, the founder of Nikola. He was convicted of defrauding investors.
And it touches crypto, too. The pardons for the 3 founders of the BitMEX crypto exchange, they'd pleaded guilty to failing on anti-money laundering controls. That's pretty notable, especially given the supposed increased focus on that area by the DOJ you mentioned earlier. Plus, the company itself, BitMEX, also got a pardon, saving it a potentially massive fine. It all seems to fit this pattern, this changing enforcement picture.
So bringing it all together then, what we're seeing is, well, it looks like a pretty big redirection of U.S. policy on enforcing certain white-collar crimes, especially those involving bribery of foreign officials. And the driver seems to be this focus on American competitiveness, plus maybe a skeptical view of how the FCPA has worked in the past.
And the potential effects, they could be pretty wide-ranging. This policy shift might affect ongoing investigations, maybe lead to charges being dropped in some cases, and it's clearly encouraged defense lawyers to push for lighter outcomes. The examples we talked about, Adani executives, the cognizant dismissal, Polymarket, Boeing, Glencore, they all show a real shift in priorities and potential results.
Right. Now, for you listening, thinking about your UPSC exams, step back and consider the global picture. When one of the world's biggest economies changes tack like this, how might that influence international standards on financial rules, on fighting corruption? What could be the long-term effects on global business, on governance, if a major player signals maybe a softer approach to foreign bribery? This deep dive into the Indian Express report gives you really crucial context for understanding current events that are super relevant for your prep, both prelims and especially mains.
It's definitely complex, with potential ripples way beyond U.S. borders. Understanding the why behind this shift and what it could lead to, that's really essential for navigating the changing world of global economics and law. Key stuff for the UPSC syllabus.
Absolutely. So if you found this deep dive helpful for your UPSC prep, please do give us a like, subscribe to the deep dive, and drop a comment if you have more questions or ideas for future topics. We really try to focus on the issues that matter most to you. And just to say it again, all the information we discussed today came from that detailed reporting in the Indian Express. Thanks for tuning into the deep dive.